Hey everyone, welcome to our TierMonster player interview. I'm joined today by Macetodaface. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. And you?
I'm doing quite well, and now these kind of progress interestingly. Just watching, just talking to players individually. Of course, is brought to you by TierMonster.com, new website out for Smite. But again, this is kind of like we're going to start out with a little bit more personal aspect, and I think it's awesome to meet the players individually, talk to them face to face or as face to face as we can, a little about them. So let's go ahead and start out here. How did you? What are your origins as a gamer? I mean, what did you play when you were a kid, or how did things change for you?
Well, I guess the first thing I did is I played like a ton of like Neopets, RuneScape, the browser games people do. But the first game that I really got into was probably World of Warcraft. Like I just I literally played that from back in when that was in vanilla up until um like a I don't remember exactly when. It was like when Bakasura came out. I basically quit WoW and just started playing Smite. So I played a lot of World of Warcraft, like thousands of arena matches, tons of hours raiding, and it was pretty much always me and my brother, who's Shadow Q, as many of you know, just playing together World of Warcraft for a long time.
So, would you say that any of your experiences, obviously the WoW battlegrounds and then the
Yeah.
arenas, a lot of people say that's analogous, that there's a connection there. Do you feel that any of the experiences you had in PvP in World of Warcraft have helped you with Smite?
I mean, from a combat perspective, it's different for sure, but I think just the level of like understanding that you need to play around, predict what your opponents are doing, and the communication with teammates, like calling out what you're doing, and just knowing your team members definitely carried over into Smite. I mean, it's not a MOBA, but that kind of stuff I've definitely found to be applicable.
Was there a big gap for you? I mean, obviously you came from World of Warcraft. I'm sure, as you just mentioned, the
Mm.
communication and the interaction and the actual like moving of the character seemed to be something that you were comfortable with, at least. But was there a big gap for you coming from, an MMO where you'd come out and have so many items to a
Mhm.
MOBA game where there's just a small subset of items, but they're more involved in which ones you pick and when you get them? Would you say there was a big gap of crossing over into Smite and learning about the itemization?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely strange. Like I had played a little bit of League. Like I played. I mean, by a little bit, I mean I probably played 15 games ever and kind of got bored of it before playing Smite. And so when I first went into Smite, like I did a couple games and I was like, "Hey, this is basically League of Legends." It took me that long to realize it. I'm like, I mean, I can barely remember when I first started playing Smite. Like I remember I knew to get boots first, and that's about it. I just kind of went with whatever. It took me such a long time to like get to know the items whatsoever, and I was the kind of person that would just like, you know what, I'm gonna play Anubis every game, no matter what. So yeah, like it was definitely a disconnect. Like I didn't understand that I would have to, kind of learn all the champions or gods, whatever. And like from the building perspective, it's definitely different. Like having different capabilities as the match progresses versus like always being able to go in the same amount at any point of time. You know what I mean? Like if you get fed, you can be really aggressive. If you're feeding, you don't want to just run in as Anubis and then die.
Yeah, I remember
That
facing up
happens quite a
against
bit.
you on the ranked when I played a lot of ranked. Yeah, it seemed like at least once a day I would get maced to the face in my game, and usually on the enemy team. I think I remember you playing a lot of Anubis as well. I think it was around that time.
Anu- Anubis is still my number one god played in ranked.
Oh my!
And
How
I haven't
come? How
seen it.
come? What is it about Anubis that draws you towards him?
Well, when I first played, Anubis was the first god I bought because I was playing mid, got stunned, feed, ultied, insta died. Wow, that is the most OP god in the game. He can one shot you. So then, of course, I play Anubis, and over time, I start to get the feeling, people don't really think he's that great for some reason. Obviously, they're all insane. I get the idea in my head that maybe I'm just the only one who can play cautious enough to pull it off, clear the wave back under my tower, and just wait for that chance to ulti and come out. Yeah, it still wasn't that great.
So
And
what is it about Anubis that makes it so? I mean, maybe if you're a viewer or new to Smite, what is it about him that makes him so non-competitive?
well, if I mean, as far as the non-competitive part, like he's a mage with no escape ability, which is not too uncharacteristic of mages, except he has three damage dealing moves, and two of them require him to stand still. So, as a mage who can basically be two-shot by most gods in the game, getting in close to the enemy and standing still without escape doesn't really work out when they start hitting you back. You just die really quickly.
Yeah, and going back to seeing on the ranked, it was really encouraging to see you getting picked up and being more active in the competitive scene. So we can go right into that. I mean, what team do you play for right now?
Right now I'm the mid for denial NA.
So you play the mid role, and then mid is something that it's kind of like in a league of its own. The side lanes are mirrored. Obviously, it depends on
Hmm.
what buffs you want, what lane you go into. That's the only really real difference there. But mid kind of has its own mentality there. Can you talk a little bit about the current meta for the middle lane, or the things that go through your head when you're playing through the middle?
Well, in mid lane, it's a lot more about you can really. It's all about the farm. I mean, so are side lanes, but you can really get ahead and farm by clearing the way faster, going back doing a gold camp. And right now, the mid meta really isn't much about killing the opponent, but just about farming them. So like, sure you go for harassment, but you're usually not trying for a kill. You're just trying for enough harassment to cause them to back off a little bit. So you clear the wave first, and then clearing that wave first is so essential because then that allows you to either roam to a side lane, try for a gank, save them if they're getting engaged on, or you can just double back, pick up a gold camp, and head back to mid lane. And then that gets you a good 75 gold up in your mid if you get to a gold camp and they don't get that opportunity.
Is there like a checklist or a goal that you're striving towards in the middle lane, or is it just you're waiting for opportunities?
Well, with my playstyle, I typically wait for opportunities, but the goal in the back of my mind is always, can I outfarm this mid? Like every time I back or have a spare moment, like I'm hitting tab, looking at my gold total versus his, which is kind of harder to do in side lane because it's 2-on-2. But like I'm always looking at those gold totals. Like yes, that wave I got this many more kill shots than him. I'm this much better than him. Obviously, it's not because my god's better. It's just because I'm better
Very
every time.
clearly, very clearly. So let's talk a little bit about the god selection in mid. I mean, obviously we're in closed beta right now. We don't have a whole lot of gods. We have just over the halfway between 30 and 40 mark now, especially with the release of Athena. But as far as the mid lane goes, I mean, what's in your repertoire for gods, and what do you expect to see when you head in the middle lane?
Well, right now, like my main picks for mid would be Isis is my favorite right now, just but that's mainly because of the ulti in the later game. So Isis and then the more typical Poseidon Agni that we've been seeing for a while are definitely on the top of that list. And then situationally Ao Kuang.
And which one would you play the most?
Um Lately I've definitely been playing Isis, but I suspect we'll start seeing a lot of bans as people start going after that Isis more in competitive. And I mean Isis is really great, but then again, you can't always get it, and like it's definitely more of a support role. Um, After Isis, I'd probably go for Poseidon just because of how much damage the Kraken can put out in one burst, and it's basically a guaranteed kill if they don't have Aegis, or it forces Aegis on a much shorter cooldown than the Aegis itself.
Okay, so in a typical tournament, let's say your team lands Poseidon for you, you pick up Poseidon, and you're up against an enemy Agni. What goes through your head? I mean, when do the advantages change? What are you trying to accomplish? Do you feel like it's a good matchup, a bad matchup?
Well, personally really like playing Poseidon against Agni because throughout the entire mid lane, you can kind of bully him through lane as long as you don't get too much damage from his meteors. Like right off the bat at level 1, what I usually do as Poseidon if I'm facing an Agni is you got to look to see if he's going to charge through that first wave because that's a big mistake that you can really utilize. Like if he charges through or even charges back after passing through the wave and then charges back to his, you can put down your whirlpool and out a lot of damage on him really easily. So that's how it typically goes before 5, watching his dashes, and if you don't let him get those dashes off for free, it's going to be hard for that Agni to clear the wave. And then after 5, obviously you have the Kraken, and you're always going to be looking for that opportunity to get the Whirlpool Kraken 1 and just blow him up. But the other key thing is the thing that Agni actually has going for him post 5 is the meteors. Like, he's not really going to be able to kill you too much in a 1v1 if you're both full health, but you have to watch out to make sure his meteors aren't hitting you while he's clearing the wave, because taking 200 damage like every wave potentially really whittles down your health if you're not careful.
It's a lot of poke back and forth. It seems to be more of a delicate matchup if either of the gods aren't too careful. So,
Yeah.
I mean, going directly into that, I mean, it seems like we're kind of in more of a sturdy, stable set of meta for the middle lane. I mean, how the gods are picked up, how it gets pushed back and forth, how it changes everything, especially with the selection we have. So, do you have any desired changes or maybe a new, not necessarily specific god, because I'm sure this gets asked a lot on streams and chat and all that. But do you have a god type or a mage type or physical or any kind of new god that you would like to be introduced in the middle lane, or maybe in changes to the middle lane that would make it more dynamic or a little bit different?
Well, there aren't any gods that I can think of really that would change it. And well, this has kind of grown on me over time, but when they first made the Vampiric Shroud buff, I kind of disliked it for mid lane because getting that health back after every wave kind of encouraged the passive mid play instead of because every time you got a little bit of harass instead of getting last hits, you were really rewarded without Vampiric Shroud. But now they can kind of just heal it back up. Like, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of grown to me because I'm just used to it now, but it was definitely interesting before how, like, as Agni, like, every little bit of poke really hurt them, but now they heal 60, 70 health, whatever, after each wave. So, I mean, I don't know, it might not be exactly the right move at this point, but that would certainly be interesting. As far as gods or, like, physical changes to lane, there's nothing I can really think of, but one thing that has really affected the mid-meta recently is the addition of a jungler, which really changes the meta because you want to be leaving your gold camps in the back to the jungler. So that also kind of makes it even more passive than it currently is because, like I said earlier, usually you're looking in the back of your mind, can I clear this fast enough to get a gold camp and then come back? But with a jungler, what usually ends up happening is you clear the wave and then you just kind of go halfway in the jungle to your side lane and then come back without getting a gold camp because, you don't really have anything to do in between waves. I
So
mean,
it
I don't know. I
slows it
kind of
down a bit, definitely by removing that aspect of the jungle.
Yeah, I kind of rambled off topic there, but yeah, like it slows down the mid wave by having a jungler, and then of course, as a mid, if there's a jungler in the game, you're also playing more passive just because you have to be really careful not to be ganked. And I mean, I'm not entirely against the idea of a jungler, but I'm not sure I necessarily like the way it affects the perspective of mid, just because like I said, it makes it more passive because you're not looking for gold camps and because you don't want to die, obviously.
So if they were to continue on this path, obviously they're trying
Mhm.
things out as the close beta. They want to explore their options here. So if they were to continue on this path of implementing a jungling role, how would you like that to be changed or altered in the way that is now, so that it would be more comfortable for, especially you as a mid laner or even overall?
I mean, I think it would be hard to implement a jungler, like a full-time jungler, that would really change that without adding a new camp or, physically changing the map. Because there's just not that many camps for the jungler to get. I mean, they could, like, I'm not really sure. Like, optimally, you would I would want some sort of compromise between how it is now and how it was before, where maybe you can have someone afford to roam and jungle while laning like half the time, but what you see now is kind of more of a full jungle, which completely stops the mid from farming those jungle camps, or your side lanes from farming those jungle camps.
Yeah, it certainly
So,
slows down a lot, and also, I mean, obviously being a big Smite player, especially like throughout the whole history. I
mm,
mean, all you said all the way back to Bakasura was when you joined up. So I mean, there's been a lot of dynamic changes to the side lane. Obviously, we went through the Hand of the Gods meta, which I don't think anyone wants to go back to. So there's that introduction there. So there's
mhm.
a lot of dynamics with the side lanes as well. So removing that jungle aspect certainly not only affects the mid lane but also the side lane as well. I mean, can you talk about it from a side lane perspective?
I haven't side laned too much since they added it, but um, the obvious change is that you're likely going to have 2v1 lanes with a jungler because either you're solo holding and your jungler's off jungling, or you're two people facing off against the solo laner. And this also, in a way, actually kind of slows the game down because while you would almost think it speeds up because obviously the jungler is ganking all over the place, etc., in between getting camps, it kind of makes the goal of both solo laners not to fight but just live. And it creates a win condition where you're winning your lane as long as you don't die, even if you don't get kills from the opponent. So, like, that's kind of a strange role. I haven't done the solo role, but it's just really passive and kind of awkward, especially in, the random queue where you just queue up Conquest and you're like, oh, yeah, you're going to be solo lane. And, I mean, this is more of a casual perspective, but then you always have that thought in the back of your mind, like, oh, God, this guy's solo lane. Can he manage to just play passive and not feed there? You know what I mean? So, I mean, it definitely, like, it slows it down for the most part. But then whenever the jungler comes, of course it speeds up and you can go relentlessly aggressive if you're 3v1 ganking or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah, we saw a lot of experimentation with that over the weekend with the tournaments for the NA and EU, both trying to work in that new jungling role. So it does have a lot of implications for the rest of it. But we can go ahead and jump into, I mean, what that means. I mean, do you have any hopes or aspirations for the future of Smite, or possibly what you would like the meta to look like, or changes, or just in general? I mean, where do you want Smite to be in a year or 2 years time?
I mean, obviously, I would just love the community to grow. That means, more viewers, high res. I mean, not that they're doing a bad job by any means of promoting it or anything, but like there would just be so much more attention drawn to the whole scene, more money, and like the player base for sure. Like the more players you get, the better queues will be. I know people complain about those, even though I mean that's mainly just because there aren't that many people. So that's the obvious thing, just more players, etc. And apart from that, I mean, I didn't really have any specific suggestions besides how you guys just keep doing what they're doing, add more gods. Um, and one thing that like that how you guys did recently, the Ankh, I don't know how you say that, Ankh chains they added. Did you see the Ankh of the Golem, Ankh of the Bear they added in this patch by
Right,
accident?
by accident, yeah, I wasn't really supposed to go through something they were thinking about doing for a while, but what he's mentioning is I mean, it's the fact that it used to be a portion of your HP, and now it's a portion of your physical protection.
Yeah, but well, specifically I was speaking to the how you have the option to change the item into two different final forms. Like after you get rank 2, you have two different rank 3s you can choose between.
Right.
So, I mean, stuff like that they're adding definitely gives it another layer of complexity that I think it needs going into the future. I mean, it's not like it's brain dead simple right now, but more complexity just allows for more unique item builds, and that's something that's definitely kind of lacking in Smite right now. I mean, on most mages, I end up going the semi-standard mage boots, voidstone, gem of iso, and for a lot of other roles, like you find everyone in the role going the same thing. So I think just adding more diversity through items and gods, etc., and growing the scene, Smite will be in a good place in years to come.
Are there any items that you can think of offhand that may need any kind of adjustment, whether it be upwards or downwards, or maybe some kind of new item that's lacking at all?
Oh, I don't have it with me right now, but ShadowQ and I made a list of items that need fixing.
Oh wow! So maybe we'll see
um,
that posted up on forums or anything. Is there anything you can recall
maybe.
offhand?
Well, a couple of things like I'm trying to think of one thing in specifically we're gonna adjust. We kind of like I'm bringing this up specifically because a lot of them we just lowered the cost by 100 or 200. Hydra's Lament, that's what it's called. So Hydra's Lament right now, if you don't know, isn't really picked up that often. Sometimes you see Loki's with it, but apart from that, you don't really see it. And the problem with Hydra's Lament right now is it gives 50 physical power, which is a ton for a phys power item. 15% cooldown reduction, which is, okay. And then its passive makes it so after using the ability, you get 125% extra base damage on your next auto attack. So, like, if your base fizz power is 30, you get, like, an extra, I don't know, 35 or something like that. And the main problem with it is its passive is more suited for early game, because it's going off the base and that passive doesn't scale with anything. Except it costs like something ridiculous like 28.50 or something like that. So its cost puts it so that you can only really afford to get it later in the game, while its passive is really only useful early game. So the change that Shadow and I kind of worked out for this item is we thought it would be a good change if they were to say lower the physical power, because you can't really lower the price too much and have 50 physical power still. So they could lower the fizz power to something like 30, and then in turn lower the price by a bunch so you can access that passive and really make that shine as an early game item where if you want to try to snowball, you pick it up and then you're just doing a ton of damage early game, but then the item falls off.
Makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned earlier, I mean, obviously items is a big point of topic, and hopefully to see a lot more items being injected in the game. It seems like you mentioned, I mean, you're going for a very standard build progression on a lot of characters where it's just very similar because the items are just so good compared to the other items. The other thing you mentioned earlier is that, you'd like to see more gods. Obviously, we need a bigger god pool. And speaking of which, I mean, right around the time of this interview, we had the introduction of Athena. Have you had a chance to play her at all?
Yeah, well, I played her once, and well, first of all, I thought her three, the thing that the little shield wall that just appears around you, I thought that was like a ranged attack before I played her, like Anubis's three or something. And then I also thought her basic attacks would be ranged. So I was going mid as Athena, and that I mean it worked out in the end. But like I started Vamp Shroud Mage Boots. I mean I made it work, but um, but if I were to play Isis as like a more serious, actually building support slash tank, whatever, um, obviously you build her more traditionally. But I think she's really strong as far as her going competitive because I mean her kit's okay, but her ulti is just absolutely amazing. Like it's a game changer.
Is there any kind of combinations you can see, or possibly even you think she's ban material, or you're just speculating
I
that she'll be picked up?
I think she's definitely gonna be ban material. Like her ulti gives you instant mitigation. Like it's by far the most instant like global ulti. Like in terms of helping someone across the map. Neith can shoot an arrow that takes a second or two. Shibalanke can ulti and kind of blind, but reducing your damage by 50% and then teleporting there, you can't really match that presence. And the craziest part of the ulti is, I mean, the damage basically makes your target invincible, but then the damage from it is just insane. It's something like 950 base.
If they're standing in melee range to be landed
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
right?
Um, there's one combo that the other team did on me today, and I didn't even see it coming. And this might be something we see in competitive, or it might just end up as something more of a gimmick. But a Fenrir bit me in ulti, and as soon as the Fenrir went into his ulti before he bit me, Athena just ultied on their Fenrir, so then I automatically got hit by that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean I could see combos like that, like Athena Fenrir, and then I could also see something along the lines of Athena Naja, ult them up into the air, and then Athena lands right as so it's guaranteed.
I
I
wonder
mean,
if
just
you
any
could
sort.
Athena ult while Thor's going up, and then when he lands, you land at the same
Oh, that
time.
that would be crazy.
The
Ath-
double dunk.
Athena ult Apollo as he crosses the map to land on someone.
Oh man, that'd be so much fun. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to play her yet,
He
but I've seen her
lands,
played
does
a
like
bunch.
500 from his ulti, 900 from Athena. No big deal.
The double dunk from the sky. Yeah, a lot of fun
Oh, that would
there.
be crazy.
So the next thing is, I mean, obviously this is all about Macetodaface, learning about him and who he is and
hmm
his thoughts on the game. But of course, this is brought to you by TierMonster.com. Have you had a chance to check out the website at all?
Oh, yeah. Well, my attention was first drawn to it because there was a post in Reddit about it, obviously, and I was on Curse at the time, so of course KO came into our chat and was like, "Hey guys, I'm number one on Tier Monster." So excited about it. But I mean, yeah, I checked it out. Obviously, it's a really cool site. I mean, obviously it has the rankings, which are really cool. But even I mean, that's cool, for the top players to compete amongst themselves. But another thing I really like about it is how you can go on anyone's build, how you can go on anyone's profile, and you can see like their last five builds for any god. I mean, a lot of the time you can see it in a tourney, like at the end, you can see their build items. I mean, the items they've built, or you can see, um, like in the popular tab, you can tell what they're building. But this gives you an idea, like that they don't always go the same thing every game, how often they go each thing, and the order they're building it. So it's a lot better than just going off popular tab. And I mean, I love the achievement system in it. It gives a lot of props, and that kind of stuff is really fun to follow along on your own profile, even if you're not a pro competitive player. I mean, it's just a really sleek site overall. It gives tons of stats on all the gods you've played, and I don't know, it's just really nice all the way around.
One of the cool things too about the last five builds is what we've done is we've made it so that any games that are displayed in last five builds, they have to be over 20 minutes or longer, so that you're not getting impartial builds or just starting items or 10-minute surrenders and that. So we actually limit it from 20 minutes and beyond, so that those last five builds actually have some item progression. So we really here at Tier Monster felt that would be a really valuable thing for viewers or really anyone that plays Smite to be able to check it out.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's a lot better than just seeing uh, Death's Toll Warrior Tabby 5 times in a row.
Well, that's gonna be it for us, guys. This has been, myself, Drybear for TierMonster.com, and of course, Macetodaface from Denial NA. Is there any shout outs you want to give, or maybe shout out to your team, or Smite, or High Res, or?
I mean, definitely a shout out to my team, and I don't know, just everyone I've played with that, I mean, if I like you or if well, I mean, there's not really too many people I don't like. Just a shout out to everyone I've played with, everyone I play with on a regular basis. You're all great. That's pretty much it.
All right, well, it's going to be us for here, guys, in this Tier Monster interview. We're going to be taking off here. Don't forget to follow Mesa to Face. All the relevant information will be posted up, annotated on the screen, and also listed in the description if you want to go check him out or follow him or watch his team play. But don't forget to follow us on Tier Monster YouTube or check out TierMonster.com to register. It is free to sign up, and you will be able to check out your stats as a Smite player. But that's going to be it for us, guys. We'll check you in our next video.
And so once you start that mentality, it's really, really, it snowballs you realizing how much you can actually improve. At that point, I was like, how do I improve? How do I get past this 1900 barrier? And at that point, I went back and actually looked and realized, oh, I'd missed a CS here and here.